This is Julie.
And this is Nia.
And this is Marcy.
We are students in a digital literacy class through Adelphi, and today we are going to be talking about, our main question is, does social media ruin lives? I think that's a very big question today when we look at social media, on the media just itself. A lot of people have a lot of different comments about social media itself. So that's our main goal here today, is to talk about this along with a few other things. So does anybody want to start first?
Does social media ruin lives? I would say that there are definitely some people that argue that it does. So I remember when we were reading for class from the book So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. Mm-hmm. And he talked about, which actually I didn't follow this. I didn't know that this happened in time. But he talks about Justine Sacco, who was like a PR person at a media, a pretty large media publication. And she, like, the internet trashed her. Yes. Because she made what she says, and what really does seem to be a poor joke about going to Africa and not getting AIDS because she is white.
Right.
And the author talks a lot about how, like, she had like 170 followers, and she makes a lot of like, it was pretty consistent with the kinds of bad jokes that she made on her Twitter feed, but it like blew out of proportion and she lost her job.
Of course.
Which is pretty wild and devastating.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think a lot of what that leads us to talk to is definitely managing your online identity. She really had a very, as he said, quote, brittle profile, and you really didn't know much about her. So you really were quick to assume that she meant what she said.
Yes, definitely.
You know, I would argue that, like, and there's a lot of people who have been, a lot of celebrities and otherwise, like, she wasn't a celebrity that have been dragged by the internet. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that, like, sometimes it doesn't matter how well you manage things. Like, you know, I was reading about how Trevor Noah was run through the ringer when he became the Daily Show host. Like, they, like...
Yes, I remember that.
Twitter feed and tried to find every little thing to see, you know, how they could kind of smear his name. And he's a comedian. So, yeah, he made a lot of jokes, and sometimes they're questionable. Like, is there space for humor in social media? Like, or do you be politically correct all the time?
And I think also people don't have a certain definition of what line you can cross and what line you can't cross. I think that's really, you know, where things come into play. It's like, okay, what line can I cross? What line can't I cross when I'm on Twitter, when I'm on Instagram? Who am I going to offend, or who is this not going to offend?
Exactly. And I think a lot of that also, you could even bring to the quote that Ronson said, where he said, her reflexive sarcasm had been badly worded, her wider Twitter persona quite brittle, but I hadn't needed to think about her tweet for more than a few seconds before I understood what she'd been trying to say. There must have been, among her shamers, a lot of people who chose to willfully misunderstand her for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about this intent, and it's also about how the audience is going to receive it, especially out of context.
Well, it makes me think a lot about, like, a mob mentality. And there's a quote in that chapter we read that talks about, you know, how we had to dehumanize the people we hurt before, during, and after, and this cognitive dissonance where it's like the people who did that already were biased in some way, right?
Correct.
Like, white supremacy is a thing. I would not argue against that. But if that's, like, the only thing you're looking for, then that's what they ran with. And they can't see the complexities of someone's identity, or the fact that they might make a joke as a white person. Are they able to do that, you know?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so, I think going off of this, we could even get into cyberbullying in general.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that it goes even beyond public shaming. I think it can go into cyberbullying. We don't know what these people are saying via just general comments, something, you know, in direct messaging. It's scary and it's very damaging, especially for teens.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And, you know, I work with high school students during the summer, and we have a lot of conversations about cyberbullying, and we talk about facts, right? Like the CDC in 2017 said that suicide had become the second leading cause of death.
Right.
I think it was 10 to 34. Like adolescents, the ideation and attempts of suicide for adolescents have doubled. In the last few years. So, and if you talk to kids, like social media plays a huge role in how they're developing their identity, and cyberbullying can be traumatizing.
Absolutely.
And then I think as an educator myself, I work with pre-Kers, so they're not exactly exposed to the social media like we are today. But I always do wonder, and I have it in the back of my mind, how am I going to be able to prevent, God forbid, one of my students, wanting to take their own life because of something that it is, unfortunately, it's not always in our control what happens behind these screens.
Right.
So it's tricky.
And then it's even scarier when you think about, like, we're talking about individuals, but when you think about, like, larger entities using social media, that's another conversation.
Yeah, definitely. So did you guys both look at the YouTube video that we had to watch or not watch? It was China's social credit system.
Oh my God, that was
talking about when I think about larger
very curious to know about your thoughts. So just to explain this very quick for those who didn't watch it or anything. So basically, parts in China, they have what they call a social credit system. So it's basically like a point value system. So for example, if I was to pick up trash off the street, somebody could go around watching me, watching my friends, and write the things that I do down. And then I can gain or take away points based on what I do. So if I pick up trash in the street, I would gain points. If I was to beat up somebody in the street, I would lose points. And these points basically determine kind of what you can and what you can't do in China. So I would love to know your guys' thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, when I first saw it, I was in shock because I had seen the Black Mirror episode of Nosedive.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that reminds me of it. It's like the episode waiting to happen.
Right.
I thought this was an episode of Black Mirror. Why? Like, this is real life. So that was my first thought. And then also, Julie, like, it goes as far as like tracking what you buy, not just what you do.
Yeah.
Like, cigarettes will lose you points, and alcohol,
right.
Like, water and other responsible, food will gain you points. Yeah. It's pretty but it's weird. What was weird for me was watching people talk about how it made good citizens and how they liked it and how they had to be held accountable. And so, like, at least in the videos we watched, you didn't find too many people that were anti the system. I mean, probably that would lose them points. So why would they get on video?
That's a good point too.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I just want to go off of that and say, I saw a lot of people for it, but those people were really for it when their points were up. And it worries me how they feel when their points are down. And there's going to be that constant struggle between losing points and gaining points. And I feel like that's going to very negatively affect mental health. I feel like it's a form of brainwashing where these people are constantly, trying to quote unquote become good people. And how can we really say that a person is better based on their points, especially when you don't even know the intention of the good act? Are they doing the good act because they just want to do a good deed, or because they want to save their own skin and get more points?
Oh, that's the biggest thing I thought to myself when I was watching this video. So, for example, in about 1:30 in the video, that time mark, this man, he found a wallet on the street and he returned it to the government. So he got a lot of points. He also got trophies. Now, did he return this wallet out of the goodness of his heart? Or did he do it simply because he just wanted the points?
I mean, there was like a few videos that we watched, and there was another clip where he doesn't even hide it. The man was like 50 points below what was the expected average to buy a first-class train ticket. And he literally went and donated money and was like, now I have enough points.
So what's the intent behind that? The intent behind that is definitely not to do good. It's just to up your points. Yeah, exactly. But also, I think it's always a good thing to paint, people doing good things in a positive light. But how many genuinely good people are not getting those points because, the information collector wasn't there at the time. And now those people are considered bad people.
Right. No, that's a great point.
It is very problematic. And then you also, like, power breeds corruption, right? And so like there was the one man who had almost exposed some higher ups for the corruptive practices they were partaking in, and he was blacklisted. Like, he went to buy a train ticket and they were like, you are not allowed to travel.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
And then it's almost scary to think that, the government could have so much control over you that they can determine whether you get a train ticket or not. Honestly, that does scare me a little bit.
It definitely scares me. But that's all I can say. It definitely scares me.
Right.
And then just, to switch, I probably should have said this earlier and I totally forgot. Going back to, like, students and teens, we also just didn't talk about how that's affecting student admissions in a lot of places. And so, like, Boyd talks about it in the book, and we read a chapter out of it. It's Complicated, The Social Lives of Network Teens. And we read chapter 1 about identity.
Yes.
And also I've seen it. I teach kids about LinkedIn. How do you leverage an online resume, right? And, like, different, that article talks a lot about different contexts and having to understand different contexts. But when kids don't understand that and when they mess up, it could literally cost them admissions, scholarships, life opportunities,
Right.
And then you have to think to yourself, obviously, we are all people at the end of the day. We make some awful mistakes.
Right.
But an awful mistake I made back in 8th, 9th grade, should that now keep me from getting the dream job that I've always wanted, or to get into a certain master's program or PhD program?
Right.
That's what I kind of think to myself.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. I think, sorry.
You go, Julie. You go. Go.
Okay. So I also, oh my gosh, I just lost it. But I think to myself, a lot of the time, should people be punished because of what they've done in the past? We all grow up, we all mature, but it is hard. Things that you put on the internet, they don't go away at all.
Right.
That's true. And
it's a hard line.
I think that's a really good example, and I think that's important to say, because things that happen, in real life, they disappear, whereas things in the cyberspace are there forever.
Yeah, that's for sure true. And Boyd talks a lot about how we have to be mindful about not judging kids and teens by adult standards, because they're not adults, and we forget that the only difference between them and us is that when we were going through those identity forming years, like, it was not the same digital age that we're in now.
Correct. Absolutely. And I think that we could actually segue into what was the original intent of these platforms. And I think Nia has a really interesting TED Talk clip that she could play for us.
All right, here we go.
In the early days of Twitter, it was like a place of radical de-shaming. People would admit shameful secrets about themselves, and other people would say, oh my God, I'm exactly the same. Voiceless people realised that they had a voice, and it was powerful and eloquent. If a newspaper ran some racist or homophobic column, we realised we could do something about it. We could get them. We could hit them with a weapon that we understood, but they didn't. A social media shaming.
So that was John Ronson giving a TED Talk, the author of So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And I think one of the things that I love that he says is giving a voice to the voiceless.
Yes.
I really, really, that speaks to me in a big way, because it is a positive part of what social media has. He's talking about Twitter, but I would argue a lot of social media has allowed for.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. And you can have people that are connecting based on common interests, and just connecting even now during social distancing. It's so important to be able to reach out to family and friends that are far away.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, now looking at it, I am so grateful for social media, because I get the opportunity during this really rough time in our world to contact my cousins, contact, my best friends. I can go on FaceTime and feel like they're actually there. So if we didn't have that right now, I don't know about you guys, but personally, I'd be losing my mind right now during this social distancing without social media.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that we learned a lot about that even through the podcast by Pessimist's Archive, and how, we can't always look at these things through a negative lens. We need to be able to give it a chance, because as negative as social media can be, you could also be using it for something positive. And I think it's important because Pessimist Archive says, if we all hold on too tight, if we can't imagine anything else that's coming along that's better or more meaningful or more powerful than we already have, well, then we'll make the same mistakes that our predecessors had. And we all know how that story ends. And this was about how in the past, people thought novels were going to morally corrupt people. And I feel like we hear that today about youths and just people in general using social media. And there are so many positives to social media. It connects us. It helps us engage with people about our interests, our hobbies, and it even helps advance our careers. I know myself as an artist, I use social media all the time to sell my work. And it's definitely a platform I take full advantage of. I've sold work on Facebook, Instagram, Etsy, and it allows me to get my work out there to an audience that never would have encountered it. And it's just a huge platform for people in that kind of business aspect as well. And it gives people that greater access to others as well as information, even from across the world. And I think we need to keep that in mind.
For sure. Do you want to share your username? Where can we find your art?
Oh my God. Well, most of my art is just under my first and last name, so that's pretty easy. I have a website.
We'll find you.
We're using the power of social media right now.
Right, exactly.
Now, before we run over time, the question is, what does this all mean? What is our responsibility to the next generation? A lot of us are taking this class because we're in some way, form, or shape connected to education. And even if we weren't, we have youth in our life. So what is our responsibility to the next generation?
I think personally, for me being an educator, I need to teach my students, no matter how old or young they are, how to be a responsible, kind individual. Because if you are a kind individual, you're not going to want to go out there and cyberbully people. You're not going to want to go out there and shame people. So I think first and foremost, and this is my motto in life, it's just being kind.
So the social emotional component.
Definitely.
Exactly. And people need to be responsible, and they need to engage with social media in a way that, they're being mindful, and things that they can say are going to be taken out of context, and they need to post knowing that there is that invisible audience that's going to see what they post.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Boyd talks a lot about the invisible audiences, and I think that all of this also means that we need explicit instruction. Like we cannot assume that kids are going to figure this out on their own. They will, but they'll probably make less mistakes if we have educators who are giving explicit instruction on how to navigate different contexts. I remember when I read about the collapse of context, I thought about that meme challenge, the one where it's like you put your profile pics for LinkedIn. And I remember when I teach a LinkedIn workshop to my kids, I tell them, I pull up random pictures of like them drinking or them in a really cute outfit. I'm like, this is not what you use for LinkedIn. It's not appropriate. And that's the point. We have to explicitly teach our students these things once they're old enough, right? Like you start with the social emotional, start with all that, and then you need to start teaching them about how to manage different contexts.
Exactly.
We expect them to know all these things if we don't teach them.
Right. And then I think last, like we just need to let them make mistakes, like prepare them and teach all these things, but then be empathetic when they make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. We made mistakes. Ours just weren't on TikTok.
Exactly. And I think that's like the perfect conclusion to this. We need to understand that mistakes are going to happen, and we need to essentially just be mindful of that. We need to let people make mistakes, and we need, to be understanding as individuals.
All right, so our question was, is social media, does it ruin lives? It does, but it also saves lives.
I think the correction is, it has the capacity. It's all about how you use it.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, so be kind, be mindful, and be explicit.
And be safe out there.
If you've looked...
Exactly.
Be home.
right, thank you guys. This is
Thank
Julie.
you. This is Marcy. Thank you, guys.
This is Nia signing off. Have a good one.